Welcome to the Tamiki Ergonomics Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jeffs. Today we celebrate the return of Emeritus Professor in the Department of Human-Centered Design at Cornell University, Dr. Alan Hedge. His research and teaching on design and workplace ergonomics is unparalleled. His authorship is exemplary. His published works on ergonomics are exhaustive, and his contributions to the field cannot be overstated. Today we plumb the depths of what ROI means in the world of ergonomics, and as usual, Dr. Hedge offers his thoughts with candor, humor, and insight. Join me for our following conversation with a pioneer in the field, Dr. Alan Hedge. Welcome back to Tamiki Ergonomics Podcast, and we have back returning with us Dr. Alan Hedge. Alan, how are you again today?
I'm very well indeed, Matt. Hopefully you are as well.
I'm doing quite well. As we discussed before the mics went hot, I've got some people working here at my home, so hopefully we won't hear any crashes or screams, and hopefully they're following sound ergonomic principles.
One would hope so. We'll see.
Well, one of the topics I wanted to touch on today, and I thank you so much for your time and attention, it's always great to speak with you, is about the one that all of us face in the field. Invariably, we get asked the ROI question, and that is, one of my cute responses years ago was, well, you're already paying for this. So I'd have to try to explain to people their workers' comp costs and that sort of thing. But one of the things that I've noticed more recently is ROI calculators. Let me ask you, how do we prove ROI in ergonomics? What's been your experience?
Well, let me start by giving you the bigger picture, okay? We have about 45 countries worldwide that have professional ergonomic societies, and many more where ergonomic interventions are implemented. Of all of those, only one country, the USA, asks about return on investment, ROI.
Interesting.
So this is a uniquely American phenomenon. Why is that? Before I get into how we can establish what the ROI is for different ergonomic interventions, let's just think about why we want this return on investment. I think the primary reason is the way we structure healthcare here. Because here, if somebody gets injured, somebody somewhere, some company somehow has to pay a cost. Much of the rest of the world, that doesn't apply. If you have so-called socialized medicine, oh, horror, you don't have to worry about the cost.
Right.
But companies still lose out if an employee gets injured because they've lost the time for that employee. So let me give you, first of all, the answer and then go into a little more detail.
Please.
And the answer comes from research that has been done over the years here in the USA, looking at what do companies get for every dollar they invest in ergonomics. What return do they get? The answer is an $18 return.
Wow.
For every dollar you invest in ergonomics.
Really?
That's true. That's
wow.
Just looking at injury data. But let's look at the bigger picture on return on investment, because we've done over the years a number of research studies that have looked at what are some of the other benefits of having a really great ergonomics program. It's not just in terms of injuries. Injuries are when things have actually gone wrong. But if we think in terms of stress levels, of health and wellness, you see lots of benefits from ergonomics before people ever get to the point that they might get injured, right? If you end up with people who are being more active at work, there's less of a risk of problems such as gaining weight, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and so forth, right?
Right.
So there are lots of health and wellness benefits beyond, hey, so I want to stop my people from getting injured. But there's more, as they would say in the ads, right?
Right.
And the more is this. We actually did studies looking at two phenomena, absenteeism and presenteeism. In other words, if you have a really great ergonomics program, and when people go to work, they feel comfortable, they feel healthy, they enjoy what they're doing, you actually get much lower levels of absenteeism. Now, of course, for many individuals, that's not the work they have, and they have to go because they want to be paid. And so there's another phenomenon, presenteeism. Presenteeism is, are you at work and are you doing work? Or are you at work and figuring out a zillion different things that you could be doing? You might be surfing for vacations on the internet while the boss isn't around or whatever it is. You might be doing sort of busy work that isn't really productive for the organization. What we see is that with great ergonomics programs, you get less absenteeism and you get more presenteeism. People are there and they are on the job and they're doing the work and they love the work that they're doing. In fact, if you really love what you do, it no longer really seems to meet that requirement of being work.
Right.
But there's more to that. We did a study with a very large software company looking at their recruitment of new personnel. And we found actually that one of the questions that the younger potential employees asked was, what kind of ergonomics program does your company have? Right?
Yeah.
Remember, many of our kids have started learning about ergonomics pretty early on in school, or at least, in their computer or information science classes, or from hearing their parents or whatever. So what that means is if you're a company that doesn't have a program, you're being flagged. Maybe you don't care about your employees that much. So we actually found that it boosts recruitment potential if you can say, yeah, we have a really great ergonomics program. Now, as we talked about previously, ergonomics is the science of work. It's not the science of injury prevention. That's only one component of work. So when you look at the products that people are making or manufacturing, what you see is an improvement in product quality when you have great ergonomics. Fewer defects, better quality in finishing. People also can do the same job in a more skilled way, so work tends to speed up. They make fewer errors, right? I mean, the whole reason that we put so much effort into ergonomics in special areas like aviation and designing airplanes is you don't want people to make a mistake. If they do, it can be catastrophic. Same in the nuclear industry.
Right.
So ergonomics, a good ergonomics program and jobs that have been well designed in terms of ergonomics also tend to give you higher levels of efficiency. So in other words, you're getting a bigger bang for your buck in terms of the output from that organization, whether it's hard output or soft output. And it also turns out that if you have really great ergonomics programs, and if you're in the kind of work where new ideas are important, that it turns out that you get better innovation when you have really great ergonomics programs. And again, why is this? People are healthier. People are happier. People are more skilled. People are more productive. People are more satisfied with the work that they're doing. And so they get personally involved in it. And when you're personally invested in doing something that you enjoy doing and you think is being recognized as being of value, you tend to do it more and you tend to do it better. So if all you want is a number, the number is $18 for every dollar that you invest in ergonomics. If you want to look at the bigger picture, boy, if you haven't got a great ergonomics program in your company, you're actually missing out on a huge opportunity.
That's excellent. And, I am hesitant to use this term because we've both encountered it, but what we're describing, as we've heard in the field, hard metrics versus soft metrics. Sure. And I hate that phrase, soft metrics, because like you're saying, you can convert that to something measurable, something you can follow, something like you say, presenteeism versus absenteeism, retention versus, needing to recruit more, or the beneficial side of recruitment, retainment, all the above. And one of the things that I'm hearing from you that I find very encouraging is we often look at ergonomics through the lens of risk mitigation, which of course we should, but you're bringing up with this ROI discussion, performance. And performance is something that I, in later years, discovered in the field and began talking to HR professionals, HR specialists, not as opposed, but in addition to environmental health and safety specialists, because it's often the HR specialists who are very interested in performance. So when you can bring them aboard and understand, this is a two birds, one stone sort of proposition we're talking about here with ergonomics. Is that fair to say?
Well, absolutely. You see, if all you use as your hard measure of injuries, what you're forgetting is that unless you're dealing with an acute injury, i.e. somebody has a fall or somebody trips over something or something falls on somebody, unless you're dealing with that kind of injury, the injuries we mostly deal with are slow, chronic, cumulative injuries, which means that over time, the level of performance has gone down, 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 down until such a point as a person and their body says enough is enough.
Right.
We're now injured and now you're out of work. Now you've got to think, okay, I have to now recruit somebody else to do that job while they're away, while they're recovering. If that job is a highly skilled job, let's suppose you're a neurosurgeon, you can't just pull somebody in off the street and say, hey, come do this.
Yeah.
So it becomes incredibly expensive to actually do all of the operations needed to be able to replace that individual. So, the mistake companies often make is they use a single measure as their value proposition. Like, how many injuries did we get last year?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's kind of okay, but that's not telling you a lot of information, right? And because the injuries take time to develop, maybe you didn't get a lot last year, but maybe next year you have a whole slew of people who are about to become injured, right?
Precisely.
So we have to be much more sophisticated. The ROI calculations essentially need to be business practice calculations. How do you measure how well your business is doing?
Yes.
Do you simply count the number of widgets that you make? Do you look at the profit per widget? Do you look at the cycle time? Do you look at the turnover of your employees? Do you look at the ease of recruitment? What do you do? And what you end up with is a panel of measures that tell you how well the company is performing. And then you can begin to look at, okay, what's the impact of a better ergonomics program? So you have the before data, then you have an intervention, and then you look to see what happened. Now, it may not happen immediately. It may take time. In fact, the chances are it will take time because a lot of things take time. You don't have an illness and take a single antibiotic pill and expect to be cured. There's a treatment regimen over time. And even after that's ended, there's a recovery time. And the same is true for ergonomics. So give a well-designed ergonomic intervention, give it a chance to really show the benefits. And in every instance, it will.
You describe, as I'm listening to you, the difference between a low resolution approach versus a high resolution approach. That's what popped into my mind as I was listening to you. And allow me to share a brief example of what you're describing. I worked with a client for a number of years that would always post that one metric, that one hard metric, and it was OSHA recordables. So
yes.
At every gate, it was X amount of days behind an OSHA recordable. I developed a friendship with the plant manager while I worked there. And one day we had this discussion. I went to his office and I said, you know what's happening? And he's like, what? And I said, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days without a loss, an OSHA recordable is causing the person who smashes his thumb to stick it in his pocket and leave because nobody wants to break the streak. Then, like a pressure cooker, somebody finally does break the streak. We finally get an injury bad enough that it requires an OSHA recordable and that person has to go see a doctor. And then you know what happens, Alan? You know what happens, Alan. All you know what breaks loose. And that month, we see 9, 10, 11 recordables. Those were all the ones forced under the surface because no one wanted to break the streak. And you're describing that about again, you have to have higher resolution metrics with more multivariate combinatorial considerations. Am I following you?
You're absolutely right. And I mean, what you describe is the sort of the classic iceberg phenomenon. By the time you can see the bit that's above the water, 9/10 of it is below the water. But there's another dimension to it as well. You know, one of the ways that let's say you're at risk of getting a repetitive motion injury. Well, one of the ways that you can lower your risk is by slowing down, is by taking more rest breaks. So you may actually, if you set, injuries as your only measure, then you can see that, wow, if all of my people are less productive, there are fewer injuries. Now, from a business standpoint, that doesn't make sense, right? So that's why I say you can't use a single measure. You have to look across the board. You need to have you need to decide from your business standpoint, what are all of the various measures? You don't want to see a trade-off where one gets better, but something else gets worse. Right. And I would say that, if you're losing money as a company because now you're no longer cost competitive with other individuals, and your one measure is, but our people aren't getting injured, that's great for the people. It's not great for the company. And in the long run, you may go belly under and there may not be any jobs for those people.
That's right.
So what ergonomics is about is really trying to make sure that you are optimizing performance across the spectrum of the different measures that you think are important to your business performance.
Well, that's the higher resolution that you're describing. You alluded to a little earlier, the indirect costs. So that's that iceberg as you described. There's those hard metrics on top that we say, look, it's going to cost this much in medical treatment and all. But then you have underneath there the case management, the staffing concerns, the rearranging the work shifts, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one of the things that I would usually share with people about OSHA Safety Pays as their online calculator and say, look, at least they take direct and indirect into account. And then they also have that slick little business of dividing by the profit margin. Now, no company is going to share you their profit margin, but you can look up an industry. And I've worked with a lot of manufacturers. Right. So an economy of scale is what they use. 3 to 5% is actually a good profit margin in manufacturing. When you divide that indirect plus that direct cost by that profit margin, and then you convey to the client or employer that you realize you're going to have to sell $2.25 million worth of product to pay for this one back injury. That's when the light goes on, right? That's when, and again, it's so uniquely American. Don't get me started, but you're right. You have to prove everything, it seems, you have to prove the obvious, I guess, is what we're saying.
Right. And there's another sort of angle to this that people should think about. Another thing that is pretty well uniquely American is advertising pharmaceuticals on TV.
Yes.
And almost always you are given, these are the benefits of taking pharmaceutical X. Right. But here are some of the side effects that you've got to watch out for. With an ergonomic intervention, there are no side effects. There are no adverse effects. It's a one-way street. Things at worst will not get better, but they won't get worse. And at best, you will get way, way better. There is no downside to implementing good ergonomic interventions and designing work. I mean, the whole goal of ergonomics is to design work, physical work, mental work, whatever the nature of work is, design work and the work system. So you're optimizing the interaction between people and technologies to be able to do the work that needs to be done.
Fascinating. That's when we dig down under the surface, we really find there's a lot to this discussion. And again, having a higher resolution approach, as I've always said, we live in a world now. Welcome. I borrowed this from some authors, but welcome to complex systems is what they say. That's their tagline. But I've always said we have this multivariate, combinatorial, and integrated understanding of what's around us now. The just measuring the recordables doesn't begin to tell the story. We need to be able to have these richer conversations. And as you're describing, they're cumulative. They're something that they all pull in the same direction as you're describing. Very good.
Well, and this is also where technology can help us. I mean, when I started, if you go back to Van Bertalanffy's work on complex systems, conceptually it's great, but there were very few ways of measuring many of the data points you wanted to be able to really understand complex systems. I mean, think about the weather system, for example.
Right.
Look at what we can do these days with computer technologies. Look at how we can actually deal with multivariate data almost in real time. And not only that, but we can predict forwards, right? We don't have to wait for a hurricane to hit Florida to be able to say in a week's time, a hurricane is going to hit Florida. Get out of the way.
That's
Likewise, in a job, you can look at how a person's doing their work, and you don't have to wait till they get injured and then go, oh, they really shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have lifted that box in that way. They shouldn't have pulled that lever in that way. You look in advance and you can predict, okay, this is not a good way of working. And we can actually give some estimate on the likelihood that you're going to get injured in the foreseeable future, so we can intervene and change things before you get injured. Just like in the hurricane, you can get out of the way before it ever arrives. Yes. And that's what we've got to try and get across as well. People see ergonomics as, oh, now I've had an injury, an incident, an OSHA recordable. Now I have to bring in that darned ergonomist who's going to tell me I'm doing things wrong, blah, blah. You should have that person in at the very beginning, because they're going to help design the system that will never lead to those recordables, never lead to those incidents, never lead to any loss in performance and productivity, and many, many other benefits. And so that's been my mission to try, throughout my academic life, to get people to realize the real power of ergonomics as it was originally developed after the Second World War.
Some years back, I had the privilege to speak at the National Conference for the American Society of Safety Engineers, now the American Society of Safety Professionals. And I said something from the heart to the audience that you're alluding to, and that is it was working alongside, actually on a team at a paper plant in North Florida for a number of years as their on-site physical therapist and ergonomist. And what I said to the audience was, if safety professionals ran our healthcare, we wouldn't have a healthcare crisis, because of the point you're making, Alan. And that is, it was when I finally worked alongside them that I learned two terms: leading indicators and lagging indicators. And It's interesting. At the time in my clinical career, I'd never heard those terms. And that's when I started working alongside them that I started to become much more critical of clinical life and go, why do we wait for things to break before we try to fix them?
Right.
So you're touching on that. Can you, expand on it a little more? Leading indicators is a subtle but very powerful concept.
Well, yes, sure it is. You can think of something like radar as a leading indicator.
Yes.
That you can see enemy something's coming long before you can see them coming, right?
That's right.
You can, if you think of what NOAA does with the hurricanes, you can see it coming long before it will get here, right? So if you think about it, this is why ergonomists have developed some of the risk assessment methods that we have. So take, the pretty straightforward, simple methods like RULER, the rapid upper limb assessment method, or REBA, the rapid entire body assessment method. They're not designed to measure the severity of injury. They're designed to measure or guesstimate, if you like, the risk of injury. And so if you implement those analyses when somebody's doing work and you find, boy, this person is at risk, it doesn't mean they'll get injured today, tomorrow, maybe even next week, possibly not for the next year. but it means they are at risk of that. And that gives you time, the time to be able to intervene and change the risk. And you do that, you make a change, and then you measure again and you say, did I lower the risk? If you lowered the risk, you've lowered the likelihood that they will get an injury, and you've increased the likelihood that they're going to be a healthy and productive employee for the foreseeable future. So these are not one-off treatments. These are designed to be sort of rapid screening tools that will really help you see the potential in the future for the likelihood that somebody's going to have some unfortunate, more catastrophic event, such as a cumulative trauma injury.
Yes, yes. And again, you're describing what I think we should coin right here, and bear with me, but frankly, almost an approach of ergonomic medicine, if I can use those two phrases together, because we're learning more and more nowadays of what's been called lifestyle medicine or integrative medicine, to coin Andrew Weil from some years back. And now there are integrative programs all around the U.S. at universities, major universities. I see ergonomics that way too, that it's a form of lifestyle medicine that you're describing. And when you're working uphill, when you're working upstream, I should say, and paying attention to leading indicators, we don't wind up with this mess downstream that we're trying to constantly clean up. So I think it's a lesson for many fields, if I can editorialize a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I use the term prescient ergonomics, right? Because what you're doing is you're looking to the future. You're seeing the future before it happens. I mean, the unfortunate thing about using the word medicine is a lot of people immediately think you're sick, you're ill.
Yeah.
It's a cost, it's expensive. Right? And that's my only reservation about using that term.
Good point.
And if you think of analogous situations. Think of if you're a stockbroker, you're somebody on Wall Street. You're not waiting until the inflation rate comes out or till the bank rate comes out or till a company reports its quarterly or whatever. You've already made predictions ahead of that because you've been looking at the pattern of past behaviors. And for many kinds of activities, your best prediction of future behavior is past behavior. So if you have good handles on that, you can make good estimates of what the future might be, and you can intervene and try and change that future. And that's why I say companies need to get more sophisticated about their own ergonomics programs. Often ergonomics is embedded somewhere in health and safety, and that's always the bottom of the pile. Ergonomics should be right up there with the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, because what you're really doing is you're making predictions about the future economic performance of this organization and the operations in terms of the work that's being done, right? And that's, so just looking at injuries, you could have people working hard, making a product that nobody wants to buy, and they may not get injured.
Yeah.
And people say, wow, the ergonomics was great, but the company went under. No, the ergonomics wasn't great.
That's right.
Because and a good ergonomic analysis tries to predict what are the things people are going to really want in the future and why are they going to want. Okay.
Very good. Forgive me, this may be a little out of left field, but I have been in the past year or so just keeping my eye out of the corner of my eye on the development of the 45001 ISO 45001 initiative. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understand that, adoption of those sort of initiatives allow ultimately companies to raise capital or get a lower score in terms of exposures, get a higher score in terms of you know what I'm saying, relative risk.
Yeah.
Have you been watching that at all? Because it's semi-related to ROI a little bit. I didn't mean to pull that out of left field.
No.
It just dawned on me, and I thought I'd ask you.
Well, standards are very important, but standards are not maxima or optima. Standards are minimum conditions that you should be meeting.
Right.
And here's the irony. There are 66 ISO ergonomic standards.
Wow. I didn't realize.
I mean, from everything from the icon on, on the dashboard of your car, I mean, all the way through to layouts of keyboards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many of those ISO standards do you think are adopted in the US?
Oh, goodness. I hate
Well, I don't want you to give a number because any number you give would be wrong. The answer is 0. 0. Why? Because an ISO standard only becomes relevant in the US if our own standards body, ANSI, says, yes, we like this standard. And whenever it has the word ergonomic in, they go, no, we don't like that.
Yeah. Wow.
The only thing that we had, and we developed this, I mean, through the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, starting in 1987, then revising it in the 90s, was a standard for computer workstations. And in the very beginning of the standard, it says, this is not a health and safety standard. This is a technical performance standard. So there are actually no ergonomic standards that are applied in the US, whereas worldwide, there are lots.
Is that right? I had no idea.
So, no, well, and most people, why would you? I mean, if something isn't being used here, why would you know about it?
Yeah.
And that again is one of the reasons that I brought Ruler to the US in 93. There was nothing like Ruler here before then. But once you can measure something and once you can make an estimate of, okay, this is the future risk, then that gives you the breathing space to intervene and reduce the likelihood of a problem occurring. It's not a standard.
Yeah, we are fertile ground, aren't we?
So, the real challenge, I think, for ergonomics in the US is we need better image consultants. For companies to really understand what is it that we can do? What is the benefit that we can bring to an organization? And then to do studies that show how that return on investment has occurred. Not just in terms of injuries, but in terms of everything else that we've talked about. And only then are you really going to, once companies realize, boy, if we take this seriously, we're actually going to boost our revenue. We're going to improve our profits. We're going to increase the value of the stock that we have and that we give to all of our execs and our investors. Once all of those things happen, then people are going to start taking ergonomics much more seriously than they do at the moment. At the moment, it's, oh my gosh, we have an injury. Now we have to go to those dreaded ergonomists.
Yeah. But again, this discussion is rich and deep and satisfying because it's again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but it's the higher resolution understanding that gives us, it's not like we have to make a case. And I think that's the point you're making, is that it's almost silly that we have to make a case because the case is right in front of us. It's, to quote Mr. Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And there they are right in front of you. But yet we, at least here in the US, we find ourselves trying to haggle with people about ROI.
Yep. Well, I never worry about it because I know that any company that implements a good ergonomic intervention is going to see an improvement in ROI. There are 0 studies out there, and I know the literature pretty well, that show that when you implement a good ergonomic intervention, life gets much worse, right?
Yes.
But this is where technology comes in, because up until now, it really has required professionals and a limited number of professionals. I mean, just think of the numbers in terms of how many ergonomists, professional ergonomists there are in the US and how many employees we have. We have a labor force in excess of 100 million people. I'm talking working adults, maybe half the 150 million. We have around 1,000 certified professional ergonomists who specialize in physical ergonomic interventions. So one person per million workers. I mean, it's like, Yeah, or per thousand. I mean, the numbers make no sense. You can't possibly do that. And so we have people who at best are sort of firefighters and doing their very best with limited resources. This is why technology can change things, because now we can look faster, better, easier at where the potential risks are by making use of the computational technologies we have rather than relying on the good old sort of chalk and talk approach, the pencil and paper approach, you know? And also companies can begin to implement measures in place to look at, can they identify when performance begins to change, when posture begins to change, when a person's enthusiasm, if you like, begins to change, because, you know, you can intervene at that point and change things for the better. And those are the things we need to do. We need to see the ergonomist as like the coach for, you know, top of the line athletes. I mean,
Yes.
They don't wait till the end of something to point something out. You know, they're in there giving advice all the way along. And that's what we need in the process. And technology can really help us do that by gathering a lot of information very quickly in an easy and inexpensive way that allows us to make interventions and evaluate those, so we have constant improvement of the quality of the work process.
Brilliant. I couldn't have said it better. And Dr. Hedge, these conversations are truly a privilege. I really appreciate our time getting together and opening up and finding out more about these, what's seemingly on the surface. Again, we'll use that iceberg analogy, and learning that there's much more under the surface, much more worthy of consideration. And I hope we can continue these talks on upcoming episodes. I'd love to get your impressions of automation and ergonomics and the delicate balance with labor. You brought up a little bit about technology at the end here. I'd like to lead that into another conversation perhaps we can have and parse that a little bit more too, because obviously that's a delicate balance. Would you be so kind as to join us for that conversation again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to do that, because here we are using one of the benefits of automation.
No doubt. Well, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's been a real privilege. I hope we can continue a series here, and we'll explore, plumb these depths, so to speak, and learn more. I know those who will watch this, those 1,000 certified ergonomists around the U.S. and peripheral people like me, might be able to learn more, and everyone benefits from your vast experience. So let's look at another conversation again soon.
I agree. Pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, sir. Thank you again. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with the celebrated emeritus professor in the Department of Human-Centered Design at Cornell University, Dr. Alan Hedge. Be sure to leave your thoughts, ideas, and impressions in the comments below. And be sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you can always keep up to date in the world of ergonomics and beyond. So until next time, this is Matt Jeffs for Tamiki Ergonomics Podcast saying, work smarter, not harder. See you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.